Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting on Wednesday, the 5th of April. Welcome to the staff, the councillors, the media, and all those who are listening in at home. I'd like to call for apologies, and we're all present, so there is none. Extraordinary business. Any items of extraordinary business? I know of none. There's none. Declarations of interest on any matters on today's agenda. Councillor Lovett.
I have on the public excluded on 21 road stopping process.
Okay, noted. And you'll withdraw from the debate and leave the room when that's being discussed. Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes, council meeting 15th of March on page 3 of your agenda. Any alterations or additions to those minutes on page 3? Page 4. Page 5. So I'd like to move that those minutes be taken as read and confirmed.
I'll move.
Councillor McMillan, Councillor Brown, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Over to item number 5, and it's the receipt of the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee, 22nd of March. So I'd like to move that we receive the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on 22nd of March. Councillor Ellis, Councillor Brown, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Moving over, there's a recommendation in there, which we will attend to now. And the recommendation is for the Ashburton Contracting Limited's draft statement of intent 23-24. And I'll read it, that it's number 1, that Council receives the Ashburton Contracting Limited 23-24 draft statement of intent. Number 2, that Council formally advises the ACL Board of any comments on the draft statement of intent before the 2nd of May 2023, including the insertion of a note acknowledging the potential impact from the Three Waters reform. So I'd like to move. Councillor Cameron, Councillor Lovett, open for debate. Being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Item number 6, Methven Community Board. And someone would like to move and second that we receive the minutes of the Methven Community Board held on the 13th of March 2023. Councillor McMillan.
I'll move.
Councillor Todd. Any discussion? Not. Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Item number 7, reports, and page 11, and consultation for the annual plan 23-24. Welcome, Tony. And the report is in front of us. You will have read it. Is there anything further you need to add, Tony?
No, thank you.
Okay, questions, councillors, on the report? No questions. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Brown, Councillor Todd. Open for debate, discussion. What we're deciding here today is not to consult on the annual plan, as it is close to the rate rise we indicated in the long-term plan. Nothing much has changed from that document. So no debate. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Tony. Number 8, draft transportation and parking bylaw 2015 for consultation. Welcome, Richard. We have the report in front of us. Anything further to add?
I do have one small point of clarification to add, and it's in regard to paragraph 16, which is on page 19 of the agenda.
Yep.
The very last sentence in paragraph 16 says that officers have chosen to retain the bylaw provisions in case of egregious non-compliance. Actually, after legal review, what we decided to do was to remove some bylaw provisions in this area simply because it was duplicated in our open spaces bylaw, and the definition of open spaces includes roads, and the open spaces bylaw provisions were much better worded. So we felt it was eliminating a duplication by removing it from this bylaw. Other than that, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So,
And
do we need to remove something here now, or you've already?
no, you don't need to move it now. I just want to explain that what was in the report at the time it was written was correct, but by the time we'd finished legal review, it had changed.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Wilson?
Is there any maps, a full map of all the roadways? Because I see there's the changes, but not a full map of all the roads with the designated, what can go on them, that sort of thing?
At this point, no. What we are intending to do when the bylaw is adopted is to develop and publish on our website a full set of maps. But at this stage, for the roads that are not, or for the restrictions that are not proposed to change, we have the register which describes them, but we don't have a map.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. I'm just looking on page 46, map 2 of the one-way restriction to be introduced at the mall. So that's, has the mall in Methven not had a one-way restriction? Thus, I know there's one-way exit, there's one way coming in from the main road, and it's been two-way coming into the mall from Macmillan Street. I'm just a little bit confused. I'm surprised it hasn't been a one-way up to now, unless I'm not looking at the map correctly.
It hasn't been included as a one-way, so it's just being added what is already in place, because it wasn't included in the previous schedule. So the one-way from the state highway, just the start of the parking, has been one-way. It was never included in the bylaw previously, or the schedule in the bylaw. So
I see.
it's a tidy up, yeah.
So will that mean that there will be more enforcement or better signage for that one way?
It'd be the current signage and enable enforcement of it as well, but I'm not sure there's been any issues with it. It's just tidying up what has been omitted previously.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lovett?
I'm just looking, at these bylaws and wondering, does council staff, do you go out and have a check-up every now and again? Because you've got one here about permanent parking on council land or reserves, and I we're up the other day, Upper Hackatree, and the reserve up there, is there an easement up there, or is that still all, what's that classed as? Where does that fit into here? Because there's a lot of cars been sitting there for a long time and stuff on the council reserve up there.
When you say Hackatree, whereabouts in Hackatree?
The Upper Hackatree and the piece of reserve that overlooks the river. There's we've got garages on backing out onto council land up there. Is that a special piece that should be in this bylaw, or we just?
It's my understanding in terms of much of our enforcement practice, and I'm sure Mr. Catchpole will correct me if I'm wrong, is that for the most part our practice is we respond to complaints. We don't proactively go out hunting for non-compliance with the bylaw. But in this case, I'm sure I'll be happy to catch up with you after the meeting, get the details, we'll lodge a CRM and take it from there.
Okay.
I just have a question. It's on around the traffic management. It doesn't mention traffic management in this bylaw. I don't know whether it should or it shouldn't. But it's a hot topic, is overkill of road cones, etc. Should there be mention of how traffic management is managed in this bylaw, or not?
It is mentioned, but we don't use the term traffic management. There's an explanatory note on just under clause 12.11, which talks about applying for a corridor access request.
Page 36.
Yeah. So a corridor access request is a permission to work in the road corridor, and ordinarily these are granted subject to conditions, and one of the conditions is typically some form of traffic management plan. So it isn't mentioned as perhaps directly as you were looking for, but it is referred to there.
So under the bylaw, the traffic management plan is submitted to council and council approves it? Is it?
No, the process of corridor access requests is actually a requirement of, I think, an NZTA rule, so which is effectively a regulation. But we make reference to it in the bylaw because that's the process by which we manage it, and that's where the conditions will get applied. And we can do inspections and audits where people are non-compliant with their practice.
With their traffic management plan to see if they're doing what they said they were doing.
More tools in our toolkit for enforcing that than many other parts of the bylaw.
So if we believe that traffic management is over the top, the general public does, it's not council forcing that, it's the people who are doing the work in the corridor?
If the community believes that the standards for traffic management that result in a plethora of road cones and unnecessary bureaucracy is not acceptable, their recourse is to the Ministry of Transport and to Parliament, because that's where the regulations come from.
Thank you.
Yeah, the traffic management plans are a condition of, so the corridor access request is made, a work access permit is issued, so this is covered by the code of practice. And one of the conditions is always temporary traffic management to deal with, depending on what they're doing and what standard is for that. So that's in accordance with the code of practice temporary traffic management. As discussed the other day, that's being reviewed across the country in terms of having a guide rather than a code of practice, so not quite as specific on what you're required, but it's a risk-based approach. But the traffic management plans are submitted to council, who approve them, and then and are audited by council as well, because we're given the permission to work in the road corridor. So that's how it's dealt with the traffic management. If they seem to be over the top or insufficient, which is more likely the case, then we work with the contractors who have submitted and who's ever in charge of traffic management, and get them to change it, alter it, improve it, have less cones there. Normally it's having more cones or more signs, because most of the stuff on their local roads are undersigned rather than over.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. Just through the chair, another question on page 51, Hoods Road in Mount Somers. So this is obviously an addition. Are there other areas where heavy traffic is permitted to travel and park on roads? I'm just thinking if this went out for consultation and we had submissions saying that people didn't want Hoods Road as a heavy traffic area, are there other alternatives already in place? And it probably goes back to Councillor Wilson's question on we have all the updates, but we don't have an actual plan of what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, the current locations are included in the schedules at the text rather than being on a map. So
Okay.
the schedules there, and one of the issues with schedules, as been alluded to, it's a lot easier to see something on a map. So that's why we're working towards having them on a map based and information rather than just looking at a schedule, because it can be hard to picture where they go. Hoods Road was included previously, I think. It's just changed with the speed limit that's been put in place there now. It's just aligning with that better than what it was before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's parking on Ashburton Gorge Road, I think, isn't allowed as well, or used by vehicles as well. So.
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm asking that question is because there's been a lot of comment from the Mount Somers Citizens Association about the volume of trucks travelling down that road and at a speed that's a wee bit dangerous. So, thank you.
Councillor Cameron?
Just a quick question. When people submit their traffic management plan and they're going to put out their road cones and do whatever they need to do, do they have an expected time that those cones will be on the road and disrupting traffic and activity? Do they say, I want this activity is going to take 10 weeks to do, or 4 weeks or whatever?
Yes, in terms of the corridor access request, there's always a time frame for when they propose to do it. Sometimes that can be a very long period and the work takes less than that. That doesn't mean the traffic management should stay in place the whole time.
So that's goes a nice segue to my next question. Who monitors that? Because often we see road cones. I know, for example, because I've been monitoring one not too far from my house. It's been sitting out there for over a year. I think it's gone now. But who monitors the length of time that those cones are lying about. Like if I said I need corridor access and for a legitimate reason down West Street or whatever, and there's cones sitting there, who says, well, you've had there 6 weeks, do you need more? Or is anybody following that up?
If it's West Street on the State Highway, then it's Wakakatagi.
Okay, choose another
But
example.
if it's one of our streets, then it's the roading team does it. So our corridor manager manages it and looks after that and orders that. And he's out there quite regularly, not as much as he wants to be because he's got office work to process as well. But and if there's a site that anyone wants to inform us about, we'll go and check it and follow up with the contractor and things like that. So yeah.
So they are monitored by the council on council roads.
Yep.
And if someone says, I'm going to do this work in 6 weeks and it's there 8 weeks later, someone will go down there and say, oi, you've taken 8 weeks, what's your expectation?
So they have to say how long they want to be there. If they're extending past that and it's been noted that we will contact them and say, you need to update your corridor access request to say you want to be there longer. Or they'll contact us beforehand. So it can be extended. We're not going to say you have to finish on this date because work might take longer.
So is there any incentive for them to meet their time though? Do you have a financial, let's say they're trying to juggle 10 jobs at once and our one's not a priority.
Yeah.
You know, how do we make sure that the road cones are cleared off in a timely fashion and not just sitting there till it suits them to do it?
There's no incentive from our end, but there is from a contractor because it's costing them money to have it there normally. So
They charge for corridor, you charge?
No,
for
we
it?
don't. No.
Okay, so how's it costing them money?
Because they're having to pay for the traffic management to be there, often by a separate company. The longer it's there, the more they have to pay for their
I'm
job.
not talking about like, I'm talking about just the cones, not the.
Yeah, well, the cones are all part of the traffic management. So
Yeah,
traffic isn't just the cones; it's all signs, and cones are one part of that. You don't have cones without signs. You can have signs without cones. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just before I go to Councillor Lovett, the question 21, page 43, control of horses. And is some people like to train their horses on the sides of the roads and go round and round the blocks and whatever. Is that allowable in this bylaw? Me reading says yes. Page
It's 43.
21.21, yeah. From time to time we get complaints about them. Haven't been for some time, but there used to be.
Yes.
And if some people have their driveways, their roadsides mown and manicured, then horses train up and down it. It doesn't do it much good. So the question is it control that or not? The bylaw.
I don't believe, what I think 21.1 controls is riding a horse on a footpath or cycle track, riding it in the road reserve, say on the grass verge, that's not controlled by the bylaw.
Which is, so it means it's allowed to happen.
It's allowed, yeah.
And also the 21.2 talks about no more than 4 horses towed behind a vehicle. So that means they could be trained on a road verge.
Yes, it could.
Yep, that's fine. And if people don't like that, then they can submit through this process for us to consider changing.
Yes, they should.
Yep. Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Lovett.
Going back to page 43, like driving the stock along the road is allowed, but you still get the odd people that are actually stationary grazing the roadsides. Is that allowed within this, or is that in today's world not allowable activity anymore? So I know people used to sit out there and be out on the roadside, on a road for about a couple of hours grazing up down a road.
I understand that you can enter into a licence to occupy with council in agreement to graze on the roadside. It sounds like you're talking about something less permanent than that, though.
Well, you get the odd one or two with their trucks and dogs at each end, and they'll sit there and they'll move along the road grazing, and they can become a nuisance. So is it allowable, or you'd rather them have them fenced and a permanent to occupy that space?
Yeah. Well, my understanding, it's allowable. I guess if they're moving very slowly, they're just driving them very slowly along the road. But temporary fencing of the roadside is permitted as well, to occupy. It's not temporary fencing for grazing for a period of time, but it's not just for a day normally. That's normally for a period of a few weeks if they want to graze the roadside. So,
But if someone doesn't like that, then they can submit to this bylaw.
yeah. And if they contact us, we'll follow up and talk to whoever's doing it. They may well be gone by the time we get there, but that's something we can follow up with as well if we know who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Councillor Todd?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Page 18, item 15, just the last line. Officers have retained the provision in the bylaw for the regulation of metered parking, so the council may in the future have the opportunity to reintroduce parking meters without having to enter into a bylaw review process. So do we need provision for meters when we no longer have meters? Obviously, retailers have fought for years on the parking meter situation. We're in a situation that I believe we are in the right space regarding that. Why do we need that provision?
And that is a question that exercised our minds as a project team bringing this work to you, and it is ultimately a call for you as elected members to make as you decide about the draft bylaw that you go out to consult on. We took a slightly pragmatic officer type of view, which is that if for future reason council wanted to introduce some parking meters, reintroduce some parking meters anywhere in the CBD, or to extend parking by introducing new meters around the fringes of the CBD, you would actually have to go through, if you take those provisions out of the bylaw, then you find yourself having to put them back in. And that would delay for the period of time it takes to develop and consult on a bylaw, which is in the range of 3 to 4 months. The officers don't have any plans to propose the reintroduction of parking meters. Life is too short for that kind of battle. But if you were of a mind to take these provisions out, we can do that. Just bear in mind that if for whatever good reason might come along in future, you want to reintroduce parking meters, and you're going to have to put it back in to do that.
Looks like question time has finished, I think. There'll be a summary document of this. Is there a summary document to go out for consultation?
We're working on that right now. We've got another item on the agenda. It's I think it's item 10, and that's the revenue and financing policy. We're starting consultation on that tomorrow, and we're proposing to avoid to just help spread our work a little bit. We'll go out a week later on this. Right. But there will be a consultation document. We can make that available to councillors so they can see what's in it.
Great. Councillor Cameron, question?
No, I would like to move the recommendation, if I'm allowed to.
You're allowed to. And moved. And
I'll second it.
Councillor Lovett. Debate? Being none. I'll read the recommendation. The council approves the draft Transportation and Parking Bylaw 2015 for public consultation, commencing 13th of April 23. Moved and seconded. Councillor Cameron, Councillor Lovett. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Number 9, the explanatory bylaw review. Tabor, welcome. Tony. Questions, councillor? Oh, anything further to add to the report? No. Questions, councillors?
No, nothing further to add. Thank you.
Perhaps you'd just like to describe what the explanatory bylaw is. I'm sure we don't all know.
Do you want to take it? Or do you want me to do it? Okay. Okay. Thank you, through the chair. So the explanatory bylaw, bylaws used to exist in a chapter format, so to speak, and the explanatory bylaw sat at the front and essentially was the key bylaw that explained some of the key definitions that would apply throughout all the different bylaws. We're in a bit of a transition phase, moving to having our bylaws stand more on their own. So Bob picks up the bylaw and reads it in the community. He doesn't have to then go and trace back to an explanatory bylaw as well to try and understand the definitions. What we had considered with this bylaw review was actually, do we need the explanatory bylaw? Is it time to get rid of it? It's not quite yet, but we will do in the future potentially. But what Tabor did find through her review is that there's a schedule in the bylaw that's actually partly, we have no authority to be able to charge those fines and fees in it. So we want to amend that schedule so we are correct.
Councillor Cameron?
Was it sort of like a table of contents of bylaws, essentially? Does it list all the bylaws?
No, it doesn't. It's so you'll see it there sitting in starting on page 75.
Yeah.
It is almost like a connector bylaw that helps you to explain the definition of something that would show up in another bylaw without having to have that definition listed in that specific bylaw. We're in a bit of a changing time, Councillor Cameron, with they used to sit in a booklet type format, whereas now we want our bylaws to be able to look. There's a transition to a more modern approach to stand your bylaws up on their own so that you've got one single source of truth.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, through the chair. So the Schedule 1, penalties for breach of bylaws on page 83, they're all crossed out. Does that mean that they're still relevant but they're just connected to each individual bylaw? Is that correct? Or
Through the chair, so the only ones that we have the authority to have the infringement fines are the Dog Control Act, the Dog Control Bylaw, because that links back to the Dog Control Act, and the Transportation and Parking Management Bylaw, because that rolls through to the Land Transport Act. The rest, we would have to undertake quite an enforcement process to be able to prosecute, and that's often quite costly to do. So we can't just go and administer a fine, so to speak. Jane has probably got a really good explanation to help with this, or am I on the right track?
Thank you, Tony. I think Tony has actually explained that pretty well. There are only three things that we can issue fines for: parking, dogs, litter. We can issue infringements under the RMA. There's also some fines under the Building Act. But in terms of our bylaws, we're very, very limited. We have submitted to that recently on that to say that it's ridiculous. Council's been asking for years for the law to be changed so that we can impose fines for breaches of other bylaws. So if somebody, for example, damaged a park, the playground equipment on purpose or something like that, the only recourse you have is prosecution, which, as I think you probably all know, is a very high bar and very expensive. And for some reasonably minor offences, you would never contemplate a prosecution anyway. So this is really a tidy up from something that we've had in there for a long time that is ultra vires.
thank you.
No further questions. Recommendation that council adopts the amended explanatory bylaw as attached in Appendix 1. Mover and seconder, Councillor Brown, Councillor McMillan. Open for debate. All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you, ladies. Item number 10, approve draft revenue and financing policy for drinking water for public consultation, page 84. Richard, Tony. Anything further to add?
One thing to add, which is that the recommendation 2 refers to options 2A, 2B, 2C or 2D, but the report actually refers to options 2, 3, 4 or 5. So when we were doing the final proofreading, it was we neglected to, we spotted the 2A to 2D, thought that 2, 3, 4, 5 would be better, but we didn't go far enough back to deal with the recommendation itself. So please treat all references to 2A, 2B, 2C or 2D as 2, 3, 4 and 5. In terms of introductory remarks, I'm happy to take questions. There is some new material since we last workshopped this, so I am expecting questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Councillors, questions? And you'll change in the recommendation. The A's and B's are gone and they'll be the 2, 3, 4, 5. Questions?
I've got one. through the chair, I've got a question. On page 87, and it's events since the council workshop, and council received 11 responses to the survey by 24th of March. Out of 57 property owners, were all the property owners contacted individually for that, and were you expecting a higher response? Because it seems like quite a poor response.
In answer to the first part of your question, yes, we endeavoured to contact all property owners individually. We sent letters to everybody. We had 33 email addresses. So we strove to contact everybody. I did get one response from someone saying they found out about it from their neighbour. And we've been back in contact with that person to try and clarify their contact details for future. 12 out of 57 isn't a fabulous response, but it was a fairly short-run survey. We did end up, with 12 responses rather than 11 in the report. We did get one that arrived a little bit after due date, but still not a huge response. But I'm conscious that these are people that are running farms and they have their own lives, and if we got 20% of our district responded to the annual plan consultation, then we'd have something like 3,000 submissions. So we have to be always careful with small samples, but grateful for the response we did get.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, it's a question regarding the district water group. Do all members, if members is the right word, of the district water group, which is residential A, B, C, D, and I'm guessing some rural ones, have the same limit and pay excess water usage the same? Because I'm trying to draw down to the 1+1 or the 12 cubic metres potentially usage water. So does everybody who's on the district water group have the same allocation of water, I'd say?
Not quite. If let's take Ashburton or Methven. If I have a business, then I get my first 90 cubic metres a quarter for my SUIP, and then anything extra I pay by metre. If I'm a house with a swimming pool, exactly the same. If I'm in rural A or residential D, it's a slightly different allocation. It is the equivalent of 1.2 metres a day, metered quarterly, billed annually, which means that if a person underuses their allocation in a wet period of the year and then uses more in the summer, it can balance out. So there is a degree of, it's reasonably uniform, but it's not identical.
Supplementary question. I'm probably unsure of how because we talk about fairness between all water users, and I understand that we're aiming to provide uniformly across the district to all people have access to fresh and clean drinking water, which confirms with the new standards, and that's our goal at a reasonable price. So that's where we've come up with the system. But I'm concerned that we've got here 12 cubes, and I'm just trying to understand why we would give potentially 12, 10, 9 cubic metres of water to some users, whereas other users in the middle of town can only potentially have 1 or 1.2 cubes before they pay.
That's it's a difficult philosophical question to answer. And it's part of the reason as officers that we're a little bit reluctant to make a recommendation, because it kind of starts to put us in the policy decision space as opposed to the policy advice space. The way that I have looked at it, and this is the personal view, is that Methven Springfield started with essentially a 12+1 system. It is a rural agricultural scheme, so for most people their use is around a rural agricultural operation. The pragmatic side of it is that if you're endeavouring to make it more affordable and you treat it exactly like we operate for residential and business in the rest of the district, you make it more expensive for about 2/3 of people straight away. So there's a desire to make this more affordable as well as retain an element of fairness. So I think in the report there's a diagram, I think it is on page 88. The right-hand column, page 89, top right-hand side, top of page 89. The 1+1 is the closest to those options to what we do for ordinary users and extraordinary users in the district water group. And you see there that more than 2/3, or about 70%, are actually going to be worse off paying more money next year than this year. Methven Springfield users, sorry.
Another question. With regards to that, have you taken into account, I understand that these water users have a different profile to the normal user, and that some of it is for drinking water, the same as every other person in the district water group, but also they use it for commercial purposes of stock water. Have you taken into account that other users that have a similar profile provide their own water for drinking in the same manner, but also they provide water through some of them may do it through a stock water scheme, or maybe they pay for it through irrigation schemes, or maybe they have to pump it themselves for their stock water. So I'm just concerned that we're missing a tranche of cost that other users face, whereas these users, especially if it was under a 1+1, will not be facing. So they'll be getting effectively their stock water for $500. So I'm just concerned. I'm just to understand whether you considered that extra cost that a similar user would face, to compare like with like.
So what you're asking about effectively is the equity between people who are on the supply and similar operations that are not on the supply. Directly, no. I understand it is an element of fairness and equity. My focus in much of this report, as far as fairness and equity is concerned, is trying to get fairness between the people in Methven Springfield that we bring in compared with the people who are already there and also paying, who are effectively, if you like, cross-subsidising.
Further questions? There's a summary document you've already developed for this consultation.
Again, it's well in the course of development. The one thing that we need to do today to help us finalise it is to get a decision on Council's preferred option. So we've got it right at the cusp of being ready, but not quite there.
So you'd like us to choose option 2, 3, 4, 5 to go out for consultation on? Put your minds to that, councillors.
Yes.
We can discuss that now, and then it will become part of the recommendation. And this, remembering this is going out for consultation. Who would like to go first? We have to go out with a preferred option. Councillor Cameron.
I'm just looking at, can I just ask a question? Or are we finished with that?
No, still questions.
I'm looking at option 5, bring Methven Springfield into the district water group on the 6-in-1 model. I'm looking at the advantages. It'd be viewed as least equitable from a rural agricultural viewpoint and most equitable from a residential viewpoint. Do we know the split of rural agricultural versus residential in that water scheme? Or are you talking about all the rest of the rural participants on the district water scheme?
I was thinking primarily of the rural agricultural participants on Methven Springfield, which I consider to be essentially the whole scheme. Councillor Wilson has clearly raised the issue of other rural agricultural consumers who are not on this or another council water scheme.
So when you're talking advantages, least equitable from a rural agricultural water scheme, but more equitable from a residential viewpoint. There is no residential people out there, is that what you're saying? Is that what you just?
Yeah, in that sense, I was talking about residential in terms of the wider district water group. Sorry, I've kind of shifted my perspective mid-sentence there, which is confusing.
Yeah, so there's two, that was my point. So, can I just sum it up? What you're saying is the people that own farms and need the water for their commercial activities, it's less preferable for them, it's going to cost them more, but the people that live in the towns and Methven and Rakaia and Ashburton, if they join, it's more affordable, less of a cost to them, is that correct?
No, actually what I'm saying is that if you are paying effectively a 1+1 in town, someone who's getting 12+1 or 6+1 in this case is getting more water than you are. That's the point of inequity. The people in town will be paying slightly more. I think somewhere in the report I've indicated it's in the order of about $5 to $6 more. So the impact on them is, there is an impact, but it's quite small. And this is the impact that Council acknowledged would happen when it first set up the District Water Group, because you've got small townships like Chertsey who get the benefit of being in a group with larger townships like Ashburton and Methven.
Thank you.
Hamish?
It may be helpful for to break this into two parts, because I think we've skipped over the first part, which is that Methven Springfield joined the group. Because it's in joining the group that you should be thinking about other consumers and ratepayers who aren't in the group. If you decide that the best thing is to join the group, then I think the weight of your deliberation should be on how other members of the group sit with the newest member of the group, i.e. Methven Springfield. Because if you agree they should join the group, you're then and then you still want to compare it back to those that aren't in the group, then you haven't really answered the first question. So to me, if you resolve the first point, which is to join the group, which appears to be the only affordable option for the Methven Springfield community, then I think the stronger comparison is with other members of the group, not with others who aren't in the group. Because if you want to make that comparison, you should leave them out of the group and then make that comparison. So that may be a way of trying to reach a process around thinking around fair and equitable. Who are you actually comparing it to? If you put them in the group, because nobody in the Ashburton Township is being compared with a farmer in Pendarvis, i.e. someone outside the group. We don't try and torture ourselves with understanding all of that when we set what's fair for Ashburton Township. So that may be that you've got to come back to that first point about inclusion, if you wish to come, I guess, to Richard Wilson's point around comparing with those outside the group. Because once they're in a different category of consumer and ratepayer.
Is recommendation 1 conflicting with recommendation 2? Because recommendation 1 says preference to retaining the status quo, whereas number 2 is moving to a preferred option, which is not the status quo. Are they contradictory?
No, they're not. I have a diagram on page 90 called the decision tree. Yep. So if your decision was actually we're going to stick with the status quo, then you can go straight to recommendation from 1 to 4. But if you agree with recommendation 1, then you need to work through 2 and 3 and 4. Is that, do you understand?
Slightly confusing, I think.
Yeah. The first question, I guess,
if we don't want the status quo, which is number 1.
Yep.
How do we get to the district water group? Where's the recommendation for moving to district water group? Or is that just a default?
That is recommendation 1, that council support public consultation on the district water group option in preference to retaining.
In preference to, right, yeah, got it. Yep, gotcha.
So more direct English would have been better there, I think.
That's fine. We've got to be, Richard.
Sorry, I feel that the question would be is, it's on page 87, the paragraph at the bottom of page 87 under section 15. The 1+1 formula does not successfully address the affordability issue, but if I take affordability out because there's commercial interests at play, it treats everyone uniformly within the DWG, so maybe perceived as fair and equitable. So I'm perhaps, why wouldn't we put that one in as one of the options? Because it's an outcome that is perceived to be fair and equitable by many people in the community would see that as a fair and equitable outcome. So if we consult on that as one of the options, and we have that the public should tell us which direction they would choose, because that's one extreme compared to the 12+1 extreme. We've got the two outside pieces.
That's, you're talking about the paragraph that refers to the 12 plus 12 plus 1?
The 1+1 formula.
Number, one page.
Point 15.
This one?
Page clause 15, bullet point 4.
Oh, okay. So no, you're correct. I was reading the wrong paragraph.
Go, Russell.
Thank you. When the decision was made to do this scheme, was there no funding options talked about at that stage? Because I would have thought before we rushed out and spent all these millions of dollars, it would have been talked about how it was going to be funded at that stage, and some of these decisions would have been made then. So was that not the case?
No, quite the opposite. Council understood they have to do this work because it is a public supply, and therefore the work is being done, and it signalled that it needed to work with the community to resolve the manner in which it would be paid for. So it was a deliberate approach to doing it the other way around.
Okay. I mean, I'm in favour of them coming into into the general scheme, because that's why we instituted it, so that these smaller communities could afford to have safe drinking water. I'm a little bit concerned that we're then supplying them safe stock water and a bit of safe irrigation water with the amount of water we're giving them is my concern. But the actual drinking water side, I think they should be within our group.
And Ms. Mead, you can't separate the water. No. So in the group is in the group, or out of the group is out of the group. You can't just bring in the drinking water and leave the other out. So that's one of the issues that needs resolving, i.e. recommendation 1, which is to bring them into the group. And if that's passed, and maybe that needs to be taken separately, if that's passed, then it's the manner in which it is funded then within the group.
I'll signal that I'll take the recommendation separately. Yep. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, through the chair. And I agree, I think they need to come into the group, and it is going to be difficult because we have heard that it's primarily a stock water race, and from some of the feedback I've had from Methven Springfield people, they've had their stock water races closed, so now this is the only option for them. So it is quite tricky, but I think we're building that membrane treatment. We've said from the word go that it's a joint Methven and Methven Springfield scheme. So to turn around now and say you're not going to be part of the group, I think would be quite unfair. So I'd like to see that. I'm just still unsure about the next options.
Yep, we'll just do number 1 first. So, Councillor Cameron?
To the Chief Executive's comment, they're either in the group or not in the group. So I think we all agree that they've got to have safe and fresh drinking water, and you can't filter out stock and whatever other water. But you could in terms of volume, because presumably the lower volume would be the drinking and the higher volume would be the stock. So is that not a logical thing?
Indeed, and that then goes to the balance of this of the recommendations of the report. What is the most sensible way of doing that?
Yeah.
But my point really is around the first recommendation is, should it come in or not?
Well, we've got the scheme and people are entitled to fresh drinking water.
Yes, but that's not the same thing as having them inside the drinking water group.
No.
Because that's a funding mechanism rather than giving people fresh drinking water.
Councillor Brown?
Have no questions. I just like to move it, please.
No, we're not going there. We're not there yet. We've still got some questions
not yet.
coming.
Okay.
Yep. Did you have a? Okay, I'm going to look for a mover and a second for number 1. We'll take
Correct.
it separately. Councillor Brown?
I'll do that.
Councillor Ellis? Open for debate. Councillor Brown, speak to the motion. Not.
Yes, I will. We talked about it in different workshops. It's all in or all out. So for me, it's all in.
Councillor Wilson?
Yep, I speak in support of them entering the DWG because I think it's the best way to ensure that if we supply drinking water in any form, it needs to be compliant. So that's the best way for us to do it.
I'll read the motion. There's no speakers for or against.
I've got another.
Sorry, Councillor.
That's right, I'm here. Thank you. I also speak in support. The Methven Springfield scheme seemed to get hit with boil water notices more than anyone else. I think the last one lasted about 3 months, and it's not acceptable. We need to bring them in and make it fairer for all of them.
Don't need to write a reply, Councillor Brown. Nope. Thank you. I'll read the motion that the council support public consultation on the district water group option in preference to retaining the status quo for Methven Springfield water. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. The next one is we need to select an option, a preferred option, out of 2, 3, 4 or 5. And we can take questions on that before we get the recommendation. Councillor Wilson?
Do you not feel that we should have an option E, which is that an option be put 1+1 formula plus extraordinary units are charged at a applicable rate? So it's basically the 1+1 plus anything above 1 unit of water for 1 cost is charged at, I think we had 96 cents was the cost.
You can debate that option now. What we're looking for to council for is a preferred option to consult on. So if anything is now able to be discussed, these are just some options for your consideration. You certainly discuss 1+1. If that is then moved and seconded and passed, that's the option we'll consult the community on. We're not going out to the community with a range of thinking. We need to express council's preferred option. So what we're trying to seek now is what is the preferred option. It may be 2, 3, 4 or 5 on page 88 or something else to your point. But we need a council's preferred option from this discussion.
We've got 4 preferred options there. Councillor Wilson, if you think there's a 5th, please tell us.
Yes, I believe there should be a 5th option, which is one unit at 1 cubic metre a day plus the extraordinary unit charge on top of that, because that would be equal to all other users of the DWG.
Or 1.2 because of the...
Sorry, 1.2.
1.2 plus 1. Yep. It's it's not a recommendation, it's a suggestion. Is there any support for that? Yes. Hang on, Councillor Cameron.
Is 1.2 unit, cubes a day, is that what the Joe Blow in the resident, in the whole plan is using? That's the average?
Residential D gets that in Rule A.
Yeah.
If you're residential, you get 1,001 unit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. We have no financials around that one. That's my only slightly sort of the impact.
It would be going out for consultation, so it's not a final decision.
No, through the chair, yes, it would go out for consultation. If you look at the graph on page 89, which shows in red, that's those who are worse off. You'll be sitting between the 6+1 and the 1+1 and closer to the 1+1 side of that scale. So it will be probably more confronting to those on that scheme. It will be more impactful.
Could I just clarify that that's more impactful to any other option with them in? is it true to say that is more impactful compared to any other option of having them in? But if you compared to it not being in, i.e. the decision council's just made, then the impact wouldn't look like that, would it? No, isn't this a comparison of assuming you're in?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It is. So this is saying, so the
Yes.
option, yes, yes.
Yes. So one council might like to also have in its mind, having put them in,
Yep.
that there's also a comparison to with them out. That is the actual impact, because they're not in now. So out is the comparison. Yeah, yeah.
Understood. Yes, yes. So yeah, one of the options would be what it looked like if they were status quo, so to speak. Yeah.
And that then really shows the impact, as opposed to saying that these people are worse off, because in fact, they are still better off by the mere dint of the fact that they're in.
Which is a more relevant.
Okay, no, councillor Wilson?
It's a point of clarification that residential A, B and C do not get charged for excess water because most don't have meters, so it's an assumed supply limit. Residential D does have a supply limit. Methven Town has meters but is not charged for any excess water use. So there is only a small portion of our DWG users that actually are charged excess water. And the other fact I think that we have to understand is that if on a 1+1, if you used 12 cubic metres of water a day, it would effectively cost you around $4,300 a year, because that's at the 96 cents times 11 cubes plus the $500. So the volume of costs for quite a large amount of water is not, it's not substantially greater. It's not enormous. It's not like they're being pushed to an unsustainable place for water for them. So that's why I proposed the 1.1. 1+1, sorry.
Richard, your question, answer?
I just wanted to clarify one thing about graph 2, the graph on page 89. That graph compares what people would pay in Methven Springfield if they were in the group with what they would pay if they were out of the group. So when you look at 12+1, then most of the people are in green, which means they pay less under the status. They pay less under being in the group than they would if they retained the status quo. And green is a comparison with comparing 23-24 in the group with 22-23 status quo. The yellow colour is comparing 23-24 in the group with 23-24 status quo. It's the red folk who, even if they go into the group, are paying more based on the modelling. And as you work from left to right across the graph, you see that more people pay more.
And they would get a high level of service as well.
And they get a high level of service as well.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yep. Councillor Cameron?
Just a quick question. You're comparing 23-24 costs. What does it look like 24-25, 25-26 outwards? The same trajectory, the same?
We've deliberately avoided going there because at the moment we won't have responsibility
I see.
for that. And I believe that the direction from government is that we shouldn't be planning beyond 23-24. I may not have chosen the words exactly correctly, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
So if we take Councillor Wilson's advice on board and go to a 1.2+1 option, that'll be our preferred option. We'll still have the other options, 2, 3, 4 and 5, in the document for consultation on, so people of the community could tell us that they don't like that option, they'd prefer option 3, perhaps.
Our thinking around the range of options in the paper, the first in the consultation was, one, we need you to decide what your preferred option was. Beyond that, we were going to listen to the debate and see what other options were around that. We would not ordinarily want to go out with as many as 5 options. 3 feels like a more sensible number, but if council wants to go out with 5 or 6, we'll do what council directs.
So if we took option number 6, then we'd pick another 2 options as well, but one would, number 6 might be the preferred, and then be another 2 options as well, or whatever we wish. But
As you direct, as council.
Yeah. Hamish?
I'm just trying to get to grips, Mr Mayor, with the table. So I hear what Richard says, which clarifies the way I interpreted it previously. But it's comparing with what they're paying outside the group currently. So given that we've spent the money, if they didn't come into the group, they would have to bear the cost of the development on top of last year. So while I hear what you're saying in relation to the blue and the red, the green and the red around better off or worse off, are we taking into account the cost of the capital work when comparing whether they would be better off in or out?
Can I preface my answer by saying that I didn't prepare the budgets to know how the capital cost of Methven water treatment plant has been apportioned between Methven and therefore the group and Methven Springfield?
Yes, no, that's a reasonable answer. So I suspect the worse off, better off is not comparing apples with apples, because inside the group is including the CapEx, outside the group is not, I suspect, without having seen that with any clarity up until this moment. But because if we had made a decision to come inside the group, then Methven Springfield somehow has to pay a share of the CapEx, which wasn't included in last year's charges, which is the way in which we're assessing whether they're better or worse off. So I'm being a little clumsy, but I'm thinking as I'm going a little bit, but I suspect that the comparison is not as clear cut as the graph is showing, because I think we're comparing one with the CapEx in and one with the CapEx out, and then drawing a conclusion as to whether someone's better or worse off, I think.
It was certainly my understanding, but comparing with status quo 22-23, you haven't got the CapEx in.
Yep.
By the time you're comparing with 23-24, there is CapEx in.
Correct.
But I don't know how it's apportioned.
No, but I can see that it's not in one and in the other, because you couldn't include it in the other without knowing how you were going to consider it. So what I think that says to me is we don't have a clear worse off, better off analysis on the reality of how this was going to be paid for if it was to be paid outside the group.
Yeah,
which means those numbers probably aren't showing the full picture.
They're going to be better off with all the options. It's just how better off.
Yes, that's sort of my point. Because it's a theoretical position of this graph.
I think that's okay.
It's just about understanding.
Yeah, it's understanding it, and the consultation can explain that. Yep. Russell?
Thank you. And I think people have to understand better level of service comes with a cost. And it was the same when we did wheelie bins. We increased our level of service, but with that came a cost to the user. And they would never go back now from that service. And if I had boil water notices that lasted 3 months in a row, I'd be more than happy to pay a lot more for my water, to have safe drinking water that I turned the tap on and didn't have to think.
And we will ask them exactly those questions. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 94, you've got other options examined. And option 9 is the 12 plus 1 model. What does that mean? Is that...
What 12 plus 1 means is that you've got some properties that have more than one SUIP. So they go from the status quo where they're rated per connected unit, and every property has one connection, to they get a certain amount of water per SUIP. So that's saying that if you've got 5 SUIPs on your property, you get 12 units of water for every SUIP, plus for anything extra. And what I observed with that is that you have got, you've got some properties that use, like the highest property it uses around 55, 56, has an allocation of about 56 units. They have 6, I think, or 7 SUIPs. So they pay for their SUIPs, they have nothing over and above that. Whereas somebody who's using maybe 27, 28 units but has 1 SUIP, they end up paying almost twice as much as the highest user on the scheme. So that was what I meant when I referred to it producing unusual or perverse outcomes.
Thank you.
Perhaps in the consultation document, we could have a few numbers around which options we choose, what they pay now, what they'll go to, and if it's a 1.2 or 12 plus or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Hooper.
A bit of a newbie question, thank you. With the public consultation, are we likely to get a good cross-section of feedback, or are we likely to get 20 responses from the people who are better off or worse off? Do you see my question?
I'll take it, Richard. Yeah. Through the chair, it's almost, it will depend on where you land with your preferred option. It will depend most likely on the scope of the feedback that you get. I expect that we'll hear from most of the connected properties on the Methven Springfield scheme. I don't expect we'll hear from many urban properties who will be slightly affected in a smaller way. So it's likely to be around that Methven Springfield scheme number, around that 50 to 60 people.
So, we need to move forward. Councillor Wilson, have you got a recommendation you'd like to move?
Yes,
just
I would.
looking at number 2 only. Yeah.
Number 2. So you're asking me what?
Your option was
Right, okay, yes.
1.2 plus 1.
Yep. I'd like to move that we put our preferred option is 1.2 plus 1. And we also put the 2 options of 12. It's our preferred option, but the options of 12.1 and 6.1 are put as discussion options to give therefore we should get a broad range of opinions on it.
Great. Could we just confirm the other 2 options, are they numbers option 2 and not, so option 2, option 5 and option 6, which will be the new option, and 6 being the preferred. That's what's been moved?
Yep.
Yep. Seconder?
I'll happily second that. Yep.
Councillor Lovett?
Yep.
Open for debate. Right, so we've got that. Oh, Councillor Hooper.
I was just going to speak in favour, but as you alluded to, Mr Mayor, that the advantages and disadvantages, it's all spelled out nice and clearly.
In the discussion document. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yep, that's for consultation. Yep. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. So we've got those options, preferred and others as well, yeah. So
Thank you, that's very clear.
Sorry to just draw this out, but I really need a little bit more clarification just to get this resolution correct. So I understand there's a new option 6, and that's 1.2 plus 2.
plus 1.
But plus one, sorry. But there were two other options that are included for consultation, so in all there are three options being consulted on.
Yes.
And I just wanted to clarify the two others as they were numbered in the report. Was it
2 and
option
5?
2 and 5? Thank
Yep.
you.
Thanks.
And the new one is the preferred,
Option 6.
Correct.
and that's council's preferred. Yeah.
Great clarification. That's good. Next option is number 3. The council support public consultation on the policy that serviceable properties will not be charged a half charge in the Methven Springfield supply area. Any questions on what that means?
Can the serviceable properties enter the scheme at any time?
So again,
Can serviceable properties enter the, join to the scheme at any time?
My understanding is it would depend on how much water they required, because the scheme is designed around, I think, a capacity of about 20,000 litres per day. So if you were adding a household, then probably yes. If you want to add a large dairy farm, it would really depend on where it was.
anyone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I'll move that one.
Seconder, Councillor Ellis. Open for debate. I think this is a good option, because if someone has other alternative sources of water and they don't want any water from the scheme, then they can source it elsewhere and not have to pay a half charge. So I think that's a good option. But again, it's out for consultation. No further speakers for or against? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Get carried, thank you. Number 4, the council approved the draft revenue and financing policy drinking water attached as Appendix 1 for public consultation commencing 6th of April 2023. Move a seconder.
Can I just ask a question first before I move it? With those changes of a new option, is it doable to get it out by tomorrow?
Yes.
It is. Okay, I will move that recommendation.
Then a seconder, Councillor Brown. Any debate?
Can I just clarify?
Oh, clarification.
Can I just clarify that Appendix 1 is completely accurate following council's previous resolutions, or should the resolution be as amended as opposed to as enclosed?
Let's add the word as amended, just to make sure that we get that.
I suspect they've just changed something.
Happy with that?
Mover and seconder, happy with that?
Yep.
Elaine? Yep, as amended. I'll put the motion. No further speakers for or against? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We got there. Next item, number 11, the local government statement, 22 to 25. Philippa. Where's Hamish? Tony. Oh, I see you're the author. Yeah. Question, anything further to add?
Nothing further to add. It's largely procedural, but happy to take questions.
Happy. Councillors, need any explanation as to what it is? You only see this once in a term. If you don't understand, we can clarify. Perhaps a clarification might be handy, Tony, as to why we're doing this.
Yep, absolutely. So look, it's really about setting up a statement that provides information to the community about our responsibilities as a council, our structure and our governance processes. It talks about how we engage with the community, how we make our decisions, and how the community can engage back with us on decision making and contribute to making our district a better place. It is a requirement under the Local Government Act, but there's a lot of value in this as well.
Questions?
Just a quick
Councillor
question.
McMillan? Yeah.
Thank you. I presume it'll be updated after the by-election with...
Yes, it will. We'll just bring those updates straight in. I wouldn't anticipate we need to come back to council with those updates finalised.
Thank you.
See through the document where the new councillor will slot into. It's highlighted in red.
Thank you. Someone like to move? Councillor McMillan, seconder. Councillor Todd. Debate. Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Get carried. Thank you. licence to occupy, item number 12. Pages on.
137.
137. Great. Welcome, Tanya. Licence to occupy Tynwell Stock Effluent Disposal Facility. Any further Ted? Nothing. Questions, councillors? Seems like a common sense thing to do. Future proof. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The charge, the electricity part and the water, who is paying for that? I couldn't see that.
So through the chair, so in the financial assessment, I did mention that council pays the power, so it's approximately $50 a month. The water, I'm not sure on. I'm looking at Mr. McCann. I suspect it'll be council if there is any charge because it goes into council's trade waste facility. So.
No further questions? The recommendation sitting in front of us. Councillor Brown.
I'm quite happy to move that option.
Seconder.
Find it.
Councillor Lovett. Open for debate. Councillor Brown, you intend to speak to it?
Thank you.
Any speakers for or against? Councillor Lovett.
I think it's a thing we have to do, but has it all been fixed because they did have issues with the where trucks were driving in? Has that all been updated? You know, the tight turning and all that.
That might be a question for the activity briefing of
I'll accept
the roading manager. Tanya probably can't answer that. She won't know.
I am vaguely aware of that, and I know that there was work being done on it, but I couldn't give you the answer. Sorry, so you best ask Mike Chamberlain.
Separate process to this.
It is, it is a separate process, but it's all part of when they're making it all new again.
We're not touching it. We're just doing an easement.
Yeah, but they've redid it.
Separate process. Ask in the activity briefings, and you'll get that answer. So I'll read the recommendation. The council enters into a licence to occupy with Carfields Investment Limited for the power supply for the Tynwell Stock Effluent Disposal Facility for a term of 30 years, plus a further right of renewal for 30 years. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 13, Rakaya Rugby Club lease. Again, Tanya, anything further to add? No. Questions? I just do have one. Why would we go into a lease with them when they have a lease with the Domain Board? What's the difference?
So the existing lease is with council already. It's just for a different footprint, but the lease that was entered into 2020 is on the basis of the rugby club owning and operating the entire building, whereas we thought it'd be easier to surrender that lease and enter into a new lease because it's a joint ownership building. So it's going to be joint maintenance obligations, joint insurance obligations. It's just, we could do a variation to the existing lease, but it'll be a lot tidier if we surrender it and start again, basically. It's a bigger footprint as well, so.
Right. Questions, councillors? That's a recommendation there. Councillor Lovett?
I was just going to ask, this new building, does council have a say over it at all, the cladding or how big or what they're allowed, or is anybody, a club, can come with their plans and it just gets approved and done?
The Reserve Board have had quite an input. They're involved in the building committee as well. So because they want to, the two parties, as long as, in addition to council, want to make sure the building is actually aesthetically pleasing on the domain. Council's, other than from a building consent perspective, is not signing off on the recreation centre side of what it looks like and that sort of thing. But the parties are certainly working together and making sure it all looks very nice. Because the rugby club's concern was that actually as you drive up to the building, the first thing you'll see is the toilets. So we're just making sure that it actually does look nice, and there's a bit of work going on between the parties to make sure it's not just showing up to a concrete toilet block. So it will look better than that.
I think it's great for the town. It's going to certainly be a great asset to that domain. I'd be happy to move it.
Have we got a question, Councillor Cameron?
Yeah, I thought the rugby club, to question, gave the council their proposed design. Yeah, so
They have, and we've got copies of the design
It seems
plans.
unusual that they don't like looking at the toilet because presumably they.
No, it's not they don't like it. It's just making sure that there's screening and there's planting and things. So it is.
Councillor Lovett like to move. Councillor Bram, like your question.
I still have a question, please.
Yeah.
Tanya, I thought that all the groups on domains, if they've got a lease, is going straight to the council. Is that correct?
In what sense, sorry?
The groups on council land, on domain land, if there is a lease that goes straight on to council, or is it going to the reserve board?
Reserve board. Only council has delegation to, and council officers to enter into leases, not the reserve.
So that's, okay, that's what I understood.
The reserve boards are a subcommittee of council.
They are, yeah.
Councillor Rowland?
Just a question on that. So is this one of the only or reserve boards that has a lease like this, or are there other reserve boards that have?
My understanding that Hines does as well, and I'm not sure about Methven, but generally it's licensed occupiers. But we're sort of, as those come up for renewal, when there's buildings actually owned on council land, we prefer leases. Would be the preference and what we should be moving to going forward, which is understand what we should be doing.
I understand that, and I think it's probably going forward. It might be looking at more reserve boards and what buildings are on them, because some of them do have quite a big footprint.
Can you correct me if I'm wrong, that the lease is done too for security purposes so they can arrange funding and it's much more secure for the clubs?
That's correct, yes, yeah.
Councillor Lovett moved and I'll second. And it's that council approves the granting of deed of lease under section such and such Reserve Act for a term of 10 years plus 2 rights of renewal of 10 years each. Open for debate. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Item number 14, the Economic Development Quarterly Report, October, November, December 2022. Jane?
Questions? I was just going to clarify, Mr Mayor, that of course Council's well aware we're developing a new economic development strategy. This quarterly report is still under the structure and obligations of the current strategy, not yet amended. So this is more a process as usual while we finalise the strategy update.
Jane?
I'd also say that unfortunately it was quite late, this report, and at the next council meeting you'll be getting the January, February, March one.
Thank you. 2 weeks' time. Or, okay. Questions, councillors? Someone like to move?
I'll move. I've just got a question.
I'll go for the question,
I'm too slow. When I look under page 155.7 with the appointment of a full-time events advisor and council, the immediate focus has been on the delivery of the core events, light up the tree, movie night and buskers. Is this the time to ask, is there going to, or shall I wait for the activity report, is there going to be more events organised?
I honestly don't know. I think the intention is yes, but I don't know any details.
Okay, and through the chair, I note the new report format, I think, and the new strategy will be easier to read and more relevant. Is that going to be in the next report that we get? Will it be under the new system, or will it still be under the 7 pillar business?
No, because you haven't adopted the new strategy. We're still working on
developing it.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll.
Perhaps out of that question, in the activity briefing report, we could have what events the event manager is planning for the next, or as much as they know. Yeah. You're probably going to do that anyway, but yeah. Yeah. Councillor Cameron moved. Yeah. Tony Todd seconded. Any debate? Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Financials. Welcome, Hayley. And we'll go through them page by page if you like, and we'll stop when councillors want to stop and get a question, or unless you've got anything to add at this stage. No. Page 160. 161. 162 and 3. I just have one question. It's on footpaths and capital expenditure, and there's a permanent variance of yes, but in the reasons, the construction will be completed in the second half of 2023, so it won't be a permanent variance. It will be completed by this financial year.
No, that pushes it into the next financial year, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, 22-23 is this financial year.
Okay.
Are we talking financial year or calendar year now? Are we switching between?
Financial year. I think it won't be finished this financial year.
Right.
This is
So
a
that's
little bit
23,
confusing,
24 then.
It is the second half of calendar year 23 by the sound of it.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand.
Clarified. Thanks. 164, 165. One 66, 67. 68, 69. 170, 71. 172, 73. Councillor Lovett.
Just going back to the stock water, you know, they spent 90% of their budget, and we're sort of going into winter. They're only doing maintenance, essential maintenance. And I'm thinking of all these drains and stuff. If a storm comes, we're going to go over budget. And
stock water, we're talking.
The stock water, yeah.
Not stormwater.
That's correct. There's been a lot of work done and still quite a bit to do. So we've got to decide now how we manage that with the budget and whether we will require additional money, more budget. So it's something I'll be preparing soon to bring to council if we do need additional budget for this year, or whether we can hold off work until the next year. But it's looking increasingly likely that we'll require more funding now before the end of this financial year.
Yeah, because, that kind of worries me a bit. Yeah.
No ideas of numbers?
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, we actually have already spent 109% of the budget. So the 90% is the income, which of course is tagged to the way the rates is received. The 109 is the expenditure, so the full budget has already been spent.
Councillor Wilson?
As we heard earlier in the day yesterday about traffic management's going to a different, more risk-based management system, will we be perhaps trying to factor that in, because that could affect some of our costings going forward in the Stockwater place, effectively the health and safety
through
risk.
the Chair, we haven't got the final details of exactly how that's going to impact us. It's a change in philosophy, and we're awaiting that direction and to know how it will affect us going forward. So it's hard to plan ahead on that basis until we know more.
Would it be, through Mr. Mayor, would it be fair to say that most of what I've heard is that the risk-based approach will put costs up? Risk-based approach is not going to be reducing from the current prescriptive approach. It will have the opposite effect. So if that's my understanding, and so if councillors are sitting here thinking that a risk-based approach is going to reduce costs, that is not an impression we should leave you with.
Yeah, what it is all about is as James Cagle said yesterday, it's not going to be very prescriptive and to say you must do this. Each contractor will have to assess the risk and then come up with a way of managing that risk, and it could very well cost more. It's not necessarily going to cost less. And invariably, when it comes to risk, particularly safety, there'll be a tendency to err on the being extra safe, which invariably will increase costs.
Might be a discussion for our Audit and Risk Committee.
Yeah, I think that's wise, because in the end it will be likely to be asking questions, have you done everything to mitigate the risk? As opposed to saying you need to put 16 road cones up, it'll be saying, have you done everything to mitigate the risk? And so when contractors turn their mind to that question, they may well decide they need to do more, not less.
You're up to one, Councillor McMillan.
172, just, is there any update on the timeline for the fish screens?
At this stage, we've just got the consultants engaged and they are commencing with the investigations. I haven't got a time frame, but we aren't aware of any fish screen having been approved in Canterbury yet, so it's hard to know how long this process will take before we get some approval.
176, 77. 178, 79. 180, 81. 182, 83. 184, 185. 186 and 87. 188, 89. 190, 191, the EA Networks report. So I'd like to move and second that we receive the financial report. Councillor Ellis, Councillor Hooper. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Thank you, Haley. Item number 16, Mayor's report. And you'll see item number 16.1, the Flood Relief Fund, and the executive team met and we distributed the funds that came into, that were donated to the Mural Fund, Ashburton Mural Fund, and they were distributed as the people's wished to the different areas. And we've now had letters of thanks back, and we've included the paragraphs rather than including the whole letter, which was mainly letterhead and signature. We shrunk it down to the words that they said. So very grateful to have those letters of thanks come back, and they're obviously very thankful of getting the monies that they got for their people. 16.2, Second Urban Bridge, and I've talked to a few of you about the meeting we had with Minister Wood. Hamish and myself went up on Tuesday last week, or week before, whichever it was, and very good meeting with the Minister, Waka Katahi, and his, what do you call it, his advisors, I suppose you'd call them, all met. Very good discussion, talked about the bridge, the need for it. I think we agreed we definitely do need a bridge, and funding is the issue. And he suggested we go away with Waka Katahi and look at funding options for funding the bridge. So we are going to do that with Hamish organised with Waka Katahi's people, and we'll form a small group and look at funding options going forward and report them back to the Minister. So we'll do that in the next wee while. Yeah, sort of about all I have from the meetings are there. Anything else you would like to ask questions of? Tony?
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Just on your comment on the bridge, I found it interesting, but after you've been to Wellington, virtually the next day, Mr. Hipkins and Mr. Woods announced their bridge over the Auckland Harbour. I hope they look at the funding the same way that we have to look at ours.
Good comment. What an interesting thing he did ask was, I noted for that project they're looking at 2029 before by the time they consult, and 5 options, 2029 before they actually do anything. He did ask, when is this bridge ready to go? And I said, we will need to consent, get detailed design. We could be building within a year. And he was quite delighted to hear that it's a ready to go project. So, yeah, well advanced. Yeah. Just one change to my diary, the 31st of March. I didn't attend the reception at Selwyn, but I did attend the Kiwi Field Days that day. So that's nothing further, no further questions for the Mayor's report. Just before I receive that report, I'd just like to make mention of our local radio station host, whose last day is tomorrow, and he served us well as council and community over the years, and it is Councillor DJ Hooper. who is also Councillor Hooper, but I think on behalf of the community, we need to thank him for the work that he has done over the years of informing us, of keeping us entertained, informed. You've done a great job, and we all appreciate what you've done. So thank you, DJ Hooper, for that, and look forward to you around this table as Councillor Hooper in the future. Also, oh, you can if you wish. The community is going to miss you in that role that you've had in the past. Is it 16 years or something? It's the long time. Yeah, it's great. Well done. Easter break's coming up, so wherever you are, wherever you are going, travel safe, be safe on the roads. Let the Easter Bunny find you, and have a good few days off coming Friday. So that's the Mayor's report. I'll move the adoption of the Mayor's report. Seconder. Councillor Millen. All in favour, please say aye. It's carried. So that also takes us, though we won't go into committee yet because we're going to have long-serving staff.
No, we've got some new staff coming at 3:50 and they'll wait outside if the door's shut and come in, and if you want to resume an open meeting, that's up to you.
Okay, they're not here yet though, are they? New staff, not here yet?
Can't get them here any earlier, but they understand that the council could be in committee and they'll.
Oh, they're just busy enough. Yeah.
So you can go into committee if you want to for 20 minutes.
Okay, we might, shut off the open part of the meeting and we'll move into committee, and when the staff do turn up, we'll open and welcome them at 2:50 p.m. So John. Welcome back. And welcome, Katie. We have now on to long-serving and new staff. So I'll hand over to you to do the introductions, please.
Great, thank you, Neil. I am very pleased to advise that we have a number of new employees to introduce this week. When I call your name, if you can please stand up and give everyone a bit of a wave. We have Sharon Watson. She has been employed as our youth employment coach. Jo Waby. She's our application specialist. Gabby Sloan. She's our applications officer for roading. Toby Cairns. He's a new lifeguard at EA Network. And Jason Blissett. He is our new assistant sexton. We also have 2 staff from the library that are here today for service recognition. Can I please have Celeste Bennett please stand up? Celeste, do you want to come here up the front? Do you want to go up the front? Thanks, Celeste. Celeste has been recognised for 20 years service as a library assistant at ADC. I asked Jill Watson about Celeste and she wrote me the following. Celeste has always been a standout employee for her impeccable standard of customer service. Nothing is too much trouble for her and her welcoming manner wins everyone over and puts them at ease. When we were lucky enough to employ Celeste, the Ashburton population was far less diverse than it is now. As we welcomed more new settlers, Celeste became a sort of auntie at helping people navigate the immigration documentation requirements as well as find their feet in Ashburton itself. Celeste has some areas that are especially hers. Foremost, from the public angle, is her work with Books on Wheels, preparing book bags of preferred reading material for household residents, and working closely with our volunteer couriers from Old Trusa, Ashburton. This service is thriving so much that Celeste now has an assistant to back her up. Celeste also manages the magazine area and interloan requests from and to other libraries. Celeste is always ready to help out with children's programs, and her famous hat dance is something many Ashburton children will never forget. Thanks, Celeste, for your commitment and willingness to go the extra mile to help the public and other staff members. And our next employee is Jonathan Nixon. Unicorn man. Jonathan has been recognised for 5 years' service as our children's librarian. Jill has provided the following insights about Jonathan. Jonathan very quickly became an Ashburton institution as children and teachers responded to his positive outlook, also known as sheer raving enthusiasm. Who else shouts hooray these days on a daily basis? A fantastic storyteller, Jonathan also has a strong techie side, and his coding club attracts many youngsters who would probably otherwise not come to the library. In fact, coding video tutorials Jonathan has devised on a worldwide audience on YouTube, with uptake especially from the United States, India and Spain. Jonathan's invention in devising holiday activities never seems to flag. As we watched delighted grandparents help their grandkids launch flying machines from the West Street Grand Staircase in a competition for the longest timed flight, we could see that a new era had arrived. A boss ban on weaponry themes for health and safety reasons was circumvented by a pool noodle sword fight on moon hoppers with young... Yes, we're getting to that. With young contestants jousting against one another in perfect safety. In early trials, it is interesting to note that Celeste beat Jonathan in a very spirited exchange. We never know what Jonathan will come up with next, and he involves the whole staff, which keeps the rest of us young at heart, although not quite as young at heart as Jonathan himself. It's been a great 5 years, Jonathan, and we hope for many more, and with the added opportunities the new library building will have to offer. So finally, a huge thank you to Celeste and Jonathan for their commitment and service to Council. It is a fantastic achievement, and we look forward to them achieving many more service milestones in the future.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you to the long-serving staff. Well done. And the new staff, welcome aboard, and hope you have a long and happy and productive working life here at the council. So we are now going to break for a cup of tea, and you're more than welcome to join us and have a chat and, chew the fat. Thank you.